Hey friends, welcome back to the table, a church planting journey. Myself and Ryan are here again, excited to talk through some of this journey that we're in.
Yeah.
We're recording this one. I think we're just going to start recording more and more episodes because we're getting more and more busy with church planting. But both of us are looking for jobs, and we'll hopefully have jobs here in the next couple weeks, months.
Crossing my fingers.
Amen. But with that said, we're just going to kind of continue to roll out podcasts, and we want to keep this, on the lock for you guys because this is important. Not just for us. It's kind of like this journal that we get to share the experience, but it's a idea of this is something that you can benefit from as a church planner, whether it's a traditional model, a house church model like ourselves, or any of the other major models that we talked about a couple weeks ago in one of our episodes. So without further ado, I think we're just going to jump into today's discussion with leaving and leaving well. I think my wife is sick of that description.
That's
leaving
saying.
well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But to give the listeners, the viewers, an idea, Ryan, tell me what your opinion of leaving well means. What is that tagline, that phrase? Why?
Yeah. So for those, if you're planning a church, hopefully that means you're already attending and participating and leading in a church.
Yeah.
So that's what we're mostly referring to is how do you leave your current ministry or your current role and to go and plant a new church, to start something new. And so for me, when I think of leading well, I just really wanted to be very respectful of the leaders and the elders and the people at my current position, and just being very upfront with them, tell them what the plan was, but also, tell them what the vision was that, that God had placed in my heart, something new. And for me, it was very much, I'm kind of somebody who really worries about people's feelings. And so I was worried I didn't want people to be like offended that, this church isn't doing it for me, so I'm going to go do something else. But just to understand that wasn't where I was coming from with it. It was just something that I felt God putting on my heart to do something different. And so my current church, I'm still working there full time, and I love that church. I think that they did a lot for me and my family, invested in us, and just to do the best we could to respect that, but at the same time say hey, there's something we need to do. We need to step out in faith.
You got to do what God's calling you to do. I totally get that. One of the things that kind of changed my mindset with this was I'm being sent. And so it's less of me leaving this organization, this church, this congregation, and more being sent from them. And that really helped me when, we're going through some of the harder stuff of leaving the church.
Yeah.
I mean, both of us had worked with so many different, students and adults, people that we cared for and we loved. And so, I mean, at some point it was leaving them.
Yeah.
And kind of, it hurt to step away and to say I'd grown up with, there's a couple boys who they're seniors this year. I think about they're graduating, and I'm no longer their youth pastor.
Yeah,
it was rough, but at the same time, God was calling my wife and I and Ryan and Megan to move and to plant this church, and we couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
It was this point that we had to, and so in that leaving well, there's some important things that I definitely learned. I learned one because I do it, and other because I failed, and I didn't do everything the way I wish I could have. One of the things I mean in that is almost over communicating. Ryan kind of just touched on it, this idea of explaining to your leadership, your senior pastor, or your board what you're doing and why. Neither Ryan and I are leaving our current positions because we don't like the church or because we didn't like our ministry. That's not it at all. In fact, I think we can both say with confidence that we love our churches. That we love where we were and where I was, where Ryan still is for a couple more weeks, months. It's just this weird thing of there's so much that's happening that I failed to explain every single step for my leadership. And that's an area that let me make that mistake. If you're listening right now and you're planning to plant a church, if you haven't had the conversation with your leadership, with your senior pastor, make that meeting today. So that you can start the conversation, because at the end of the day, I really want John, my senior pastor, to be my biggest supporter.
Yeah.
I don't want to create, tension or any animosity in there. I want to be able to turn right to John come those hard days and say, what do I do? And I believe that we've got to the point to where when that, and I'm not saying if, it's a when.
Yeah.
Like, it'll happen. When that moment comes, I know, I trust that I can call John, that I can call my leadership, I can call people on my board and just ask them, here's our dilemma, here's our issue, or here's this. Help me out. Or even just the matter of being able to, John texts me every week and he asks, how's my job progress? Where have I gotten, new places here, there, tell me what's up. And it's just always this idea of explaining, yeah, I'm still here, nothing's changed. He's like, I'm sorry, but we're still praying for you. We still love you. We still care for you, And so there's this idea of leaving well, because it's not just you're not just leaving. You're being sent. And it's, at least in our kind of experience here, a part of the Nazarene Church.
Yeah.
We're still co-pastors with our friends and our pastors and our bosses.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody likes to use the B word, boss, but this idea of Ryan and I are now, co-lead pastors of The Table, a church plant in the East Valley, which connects us to both of our prior churches, Tempe and Mesa, which are also in the East Valley.
Yeah. I think that was another thing is that, because we weren't doing what it's called a parachute plant, where you go and you move into a new community, a new place. Like, we're still in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We don't. Burning bridges is not a good idea.
No, sir.
For us, and I agree. Communicate, over communicate, if anything. And some of it's going to depend on who your senior pastor is, who your leaders are. Part of the reason I was really timid to over communicate at first is because my last senior pastor, before he was a pastor, he worked in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
He ran a company, and basically he told me, he flat out told me, he said, if you're leaving, don't tell me. Because he said basically, he's like, the second you tell me you're leaving, I'm already, as far as I'm concerned, you're checked out, you're not here anymore. Yeah. And so that's what I really wanted to fight against, because I didn't want anybody in my current church to think oh, well, Ryan's he's got one foot out the door.
Yeah.
So he's not really committed to doing what he's already doing here.
Mm-hmm.
And so while it wasn't really a secret that we were going to plant the church, plant the table, for us, I didn't really widely communicate that to the larger church for 5 or 6 months.
Seriously, I think we didn't say officially on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
It was 4 weeks before I left.
Yeah.
Is when we officially told people that we were leaving our position here at Tempe and planting the table. And I totally get that trepidation of, I don't want people to think, because I wasn't this person that was half out.
Yeah.
My last Sunday, I got on top of, not on a ladder, I got on top of a 6-foot ladder and had to fix the cameras for our streaming, because I still worked there.
Yeah.
I still cared about the people. I still wanted things to work well. And so it wasn't the smartest decision to stand on top of a 6-foot ladder. John actually came.
Hold it?
Yeah, John came up and he held it and he says, hey, we don't have workers' comp. And I was like, yeah, I know, my last Sunday. Oh, man. But just this idea of we're to the very end, I was committed at Tempe. Till the very end, Ryan will be committed at Mesa.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't be excited and committed for the future of the table. But why do you think that, we delayed this idea of telling people about the table? Why did we not, right off the bat, okay, it's happening, we had our first meeting with the DAB months ago, why didn't we just explain it to them? Why did we do that delay?
I think there's a couple of reasons why you want to kind of wait until the end. First of all, you don't want to give, especially with planting, I feel like the closer you get to planting, the more real it gets for people. So if you're hey, we're going to plant a church in 2 years, people might get really excited about it, but it's really hard to maintain that excitement for 2 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
We've been talking about planting the table for a little over a year now, and I'm already starting to kind of feel myself is this thing ever going to happen?
Yeah.
And so you don't want to get people, because people like new things. I mean, there's a reason why buying a new car, buying a new TV. People like new shiny things.
Yep.
That's why we wait for the Amazon person to come and drop off the package for whatever it is. But it's really easy to kind of get excited about something new, but then be like, well, I thought we were starting something new. What's going on?
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. And then also, just the idea of, to leave well. We want everybody to understand that, like, hey, like, we're still committed here. We're still bought into the mission and vision of this church, and not just thinking about what's coming next.
Yeah.
Which I know can be hard, and it requires a little bit of kind of partitioning in your brain, like, hey, this is for my job that I get paid for, that I believe in and want to be a part of, but then this is for the table, which we're starting, which one day maybe I'll get paid for.
Yeah, amen. Well, and just like this idea of when you can almost create division, right? When if you were to announce maybe too early, and again, every scenario is going to be different, but I think there is this kind of timeline that I think the majority of church planters who are planting with the church should follow, right? You're going through this process, you're getting the ideas, you're presenting them to your leadership, and so our boards knew, our pastors knew, and a lot of our close staff and friends knew that this was happening, but we didn't present to the greater church because back in January of 2020, that was over a year off from our original launch date, which we're supposed to be launching. We were recording this on February 2nd. We're supposed to be launching in 5 days. It's supposed to be. Original plan. You can listen to the last podcast episode where we talked about that, or whichever one. It might, who knows when this was getting
time. It's COVID.
It's relative.
Time doesn't mean anything. I don't know what day of the week it is, and it doesn't matter.
That's right. That's right. But this idea of when you got to the moment, I remember my kind of launch Sunday, the first Sunday in December when we talked about it. There was a lot of people that were really excited for us, and people literally wrote checks that day because they wanted to be a part. But then there were people who didn't talk to me for 2 weeks because they had to process their pastor for the last 5 years is leaving. That their pastor that they love, that they trust, that they've put their time and effort and money into is going away. And it's not that I don't want them to come with me. What's really nice is that I'm literally in the same neighborhood. I'm not moving to a different state. So, like, a lot of those relationships can continue. What's funny is I'm working out with a boy I mentor from my youth group who's graduating this year. And he was telling me, I'm glad you're planting the church, Trevor. I said, well, why? He said, well, I'm spending more time with you now, working out every evening, than I was when you were my youth pastor. And that's not to say that I was a bad youth pastor, but when I had 40 kids to work with, I just put my attention 40 different ways. And now that I'm not in that role and there's a new youth pastor, they're able to care and love for those kids. This kid who I've had a relationship with for 5 years, we get to meet together 3 nights a week. We get to work out and talk about his future car project and the church, and it's just this weird kind of, at the same time, he still goes to Tempe. They're not leaving anytime soon, so it's this, I don't know, church plan, it's all different. If you want to take a moment, in the Anchor app, if you can download Anchor, there's a way that you can respond. Leave us a message. If you're planting a church, tell us your story of leaving. Or if you're about to talk about it, or maybe about to go to your leadership, tell us your fears, your anxieties about that. We want to hear where you're at with this as well, because everyone's story is different. And
I know for me, I was really, like I said earlier, I was really anxious about it. Mostly because of the whole idea of, like, I didn't want my senior pastor to think, like, I was, like, kind of moving on. But also, like, I mean, it could be one of those things, like, where, maybe your church is, barely making it financially, like, it's not like, hey, like, that's a tither, or we don't want them taking away other people who are giving right now.
Absolutely.
And that's like one of those, it's kind of church politics, but at the same time, I think it's a question you need to ask.
Absolutely. Well, so there's some research that we were going through in some of the DCPI training, which is just discipleship training that, I mean, it's great, right? Like this, we've gone through a couple of the classes. Some of them, it's pretty repetitive material. But a lot of it was it expanded our understanding of church culture, discipleship, and church planting. And one of the things they talked about, because that's a huge thing for a pastor to say, okay, you're going to leave my church. A staff member that I pay is leaving
Yeah.
my church,
Yeah.
and then is going to take people from my church
Yeah.
and give me money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this idea, it's a scary ask. It's a scary thing to do and to give. But I remember hearing from Mark Bain talking about this idea of when you send, and your church is a sending church that is
Yeah.
helping multiply the kingdom,
Yeah.
that it becomes noticed within your community and the greater community.
Yeah.
And more often than not, more people come
Yeah.
to your church. So when you send and when you are showing
Yeah.
the world that you are not just about doing within what your church has done for 10, 50, 30 years,
Yeah.
it begins this new thing to not only people outside,
Yeah.
but then the people within who
But
might not be giving, right? Who
Yeah.
might not be serving can step up.
But that's also, I mean, it's also, I think, another thing. Like, I think that's all true, and I think it's an example of God's faithfulness.
Yeah.
Like God sees where you are stepping out in faith, and will
Absolutely.
reward you for that.
For sure.
And then this idea of like, so one of the things that we've learned in those church planning courses on DCPI is that basically the church planner, the church planning pastor, you should try to become talking people into staying, and the senior your senior the current senior pastor of the church of sending church, you should be telling people to go.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that healthy relationship of like, hey, you guys should really stay here, but this church needs you, and then your senior leader is hopefully saying, no, you guys should go.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, we're not in competition with
No.
each other.
We're on the same team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I had that conversation with a few of our teenage girls. We told them that we were leaving just a few weeks before we announced to the greater church, and so my wife and I were having a discussion with them over coffee, or maybe it was over text. I can't remember, but we were talking about this idea of, we love you,
Yeah.
we care a lot about you, but we want you to be a part of Tempe,
Yeah.
and we want you to be a part of the future going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't like something, don't complain and
Yeah.
put my head down in the
Yeah.
sand. Get up and become a part of the change that you want. If you want this group or this church to go in a new direction, then be that person and that voice to do that. Don't be the dissenter or one that's just going to leave because they didn't like this or they like the other pastor more.
Yeah.
There's many times, like you just said, that I told people, hey, I would love for you guys to join the table. If God is calling you to do that,
Mm-hmm.
then by all means, don't run away from that call. But I think that there's a lot at Tempe that you can do. There's people. We need more people on the tech team. We need
Yeah.
more people on the drum set.
Yeah.
And it's this whole idea of, it's exciting that we have, 4 families that are joining us from Tempe to move forward and to plant the table with us. And it's all in good faith, and this idea of we're on the same team, going for the same goal. It's just a different location within the same region, really.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like where you wanna leave well, which is kind of what we're talking about, and this idea of like, hey, like we're not here to take your people, take your money, and honestly, like for us to plant a church, like we don't want to just take people from one church and maybe 2 or 3 other churches and start a new church. It's like in reality, there's no net gain for the kingdom.
Yeah, at that point.
Like our goal is we want to share the gospel, and that's one of the things about church planting is that the more churches you have, the more Christians you have.
Yeah, typically.
The church planting is the most effective way to evangelize because church plants have to. If you want to survive, if you want to keep going, you gotta be out there telling people about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so we didn't want to. I know you and I have definitely talked about this. We didn't want to just be a place where we, take 4 or 5 families from a couple different churches and then poof, we have a new church.
Yeah.
When it's like in reality, it's like, well, those people would probably be better off if they just stayed where they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they stepped up in the community that they were in.
Yeah.
And there's this idea of, well, don't you want a launch team and a core team of all Christian people, right? Yeah. And I was in that belief system of, I want my launch team to be these hardcore, really developed Christian people.
Yeah.
And Mark Bain, he's one of the DCPI trainers, he told us, no.
Yeah.
It's actually a healthy mix
Yeah.
of you want some Christian people, obviously, on your team that understand and believe what you believe.
Yeah.
But you also want non-Christian people not just to join your church,
Yeah.
but to be on your team.
Yeah.
I think of, a guy that that we're trying to connect with and work with, planting and his food network that he runs. And this guy is probably amazing in business, right?
Yeah.
And super intelligent.
Yeah.
And we need him on our team because he gets just an entire different culture and different mindset of planting a church is also a business, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not, our goal is not to make money, like Ryan said. Hopefully we get paid one day.
Yeah.
But this idea of when we bring in non-Christian people, they have skill sets that we can also tap into.
Mm-hmm.
One of my good friends, he's big into video editing, and I think he would consider himself a Christian, but to be able to rely on, we don't have to sit here and spend the majority of our time filming and editing and putting all this stuff together, but we can get people on the team, which, you know who you are. If you're listening to this, we need those videos done.
Yes. Yeah, we need skills that are outside of, even then it's just, I'm thinking of it more of it in terms of, just inviting people to be a part of a community. People want to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And we just, once again, who knows when this will go out, but we, at the time we're recording this, we just had our first launch team meeting, and we were hoping to get some new people on board, but
we had one for a little bit.
We had one who came for 5 minutes, and she felt a little left out.
Yeah, she did. And it was confusing because she didn't make it at the beginning, and I was sick, so I'm on the couch like dying, like on my phone. Like, I think I can be here, guys. Like half in and out of sleep because
part of that's like just the fact that like online is just not ideal.
No, yeah.
Then part of it's just like I don't think we probably did as good of a job as we could have in communicating who we wanted to be at that meeting.
Yeah.
And how they got involved.
We learned. Right?
Yeah.
We figured it out. What we're going to do better next time. We're going to use Zoom.
Yeah. Zoom is a good tool to use. But yeah, I think the thing that I'm really worried about, like, leaving well, and that, like, hey, I'm communicating, I'm telling them I'm not against you, I'm for you.
Yeah.
And then also, like this, I like what you said about this idea of being sent.
Yeah.
We're going, and both of our planting churches, both of our Tempe and Mesa, are giving in some way to start the table.
Yeah.
Whether that's through finances or that's through people, there's sacrifices that's being made.
Mm-hmm.
And so to honor that, and this idea of like, hey, we're taking the resources and that you're giving us, and we want to be faithful.
Yes, good stewards with it. Well, I love how, as corny as it sounds, right? But I loved how my senior pastor kind of described this. Every person that comes to Christ through the table is basically just a grandchild Christian of Tempe. He's a grandchild Christian of Mesa. This idea of we sent the table, we sent the leaders and the people of the table, and every Christian that comes after them, in turn, comes because of the faithfulness of Tempe and Mesa. Mm-hmm. And you can track that back forever, right? Yeah. Like you can track that. That's literally to Jesus.
Yeah.
We can go all the way back to the first person, right?
Unless you're in the church in Jerusalem, you're part of the church planet.
Yeah, seriously. And it's this idea, and that's maybe a great way to close it, this idea of every church is a church plant.
Yeah.
And at every point, even if you're not planting a church, you're listening to this, you're just a pastor, maybe you're feeling called to take that next ministry assignment, or maybe you're leaving the ministry for a time and going into the secular world.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're at, but this idea of leaving well transcends just planting a church.
Yeah.
But where you're at, not burning the bridges, regardless of how good or bad the situation you might be in is.
Yeah.
But you are going forth because of your example of who Christ is will go beyond what your label is or where you went or are going to church is. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's so much more that we could obviously say about leaving and going and sending and planting, but any final remarks on this idea of leaving well, Ryan? And you're going to do it here soon. Is there any trepidation that you have in the next coming months?
Yeah, I do. Part of my thing is like, I'm sure this is true for you too at Tempe, but at Mesa, my church, I started things that were new.
Yeah.
I changed things. I did things that were different. And part of my fear is that as soon as I leave, those things are just getting left behind. And those are things that like I changed and did differently because I felt like they were beneficial to the church. And so and for a long time I was just like, I want to make sure that this thing that I started is going to keep going, and at some point I just kind of just realized that's outside my control.
Yeah.
And really just learned how to give that up. So yeah, maybe that would be my biggest advice is just don't hold anything too tightly.
Yeah.
Like the truth is that things are going to change because you leave, and they're probably not going to change the way that you want them to change. But in reality, you have to trust that it's God's church.
Yeah.
It's and maybe things will be better.
Yeah.
It's
very possible, and that's where I had that same experience where my replacement was there because he went to the church that I was at. It wasn't like we were looking for this brand new youth pastor, but the guy who replaced me went to church with me.
Yeah.
And so I had all this stuff that I had built up and all these things that I thought were really good and great, which I still believe.
Yeah.
And, the new guy, he's doing some awesome things. They just started Don't Not Forget to Pray last Sundays of the month, where they bring the kids in and they just pray for before 5 minutes before church.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that at all. Like that's awesome idea. Go ahead, make those changes, and just this idea of, like you said, not holding too tightly to anything.
Yeah.
And the reality is, we're still on the same team.
Yeah.
The changes they make, in our opinion, for better or worse, hopefully we're praying this way, always benefits the kingdom and is always beneficial to that church and that community for growth and so many different things. Like we said, we can go on this for so many more hours, but we'll just kind of wrap it here. Friends, thank you so much for being with us again on the Table, a podcast, or the church planting journey. There we go. Still get it all mixed up. One day I'll get it right. If you guys want to support us, we are the Table Naz. We're a church plant, a house church network here in Mesa, Arizona. Ryan and I are co-lead pastors. You can find us on our website at thetablenaz.church. If you want to support us, it's thetablenaz.church/support. We're on all of the social medias at the Table Naz. Instagram's the only weird one because they thought it was like a cuss word or something. They wouldn't let me do it. So it's the table.naz on Instagram.
Yeah. Rate, review, share with your friends. That's one of the things that I listen to podcasts all the time. They always say, give us those 5-star ratings. Maybe if we get some 5-star ratings, we can read them out loud.
There we go. You give us a good enough 5-star rating or funny, and there we go, funny enough. Yeah. Something that's
Well, I mean,
us,
just not too inappropriate. I guess would probably be the main thing to say. But yeah, give us that helps people find the show. We're doing this because we believe that people should learn from our experience and from our mistakes
while we're in the trenches.
Yeah. So if you know somebody who might be planting or wants maybe thinking about planting, maybe praying about it, let them know.
Yeah.
We want to, and then feel free to contact us. I think one of the things I've really gotten comfortable with in the last year is just cold calling people or cold just sending emails and saying, hey, I hear you're planning a church. Can we get together and talk? And
absolutely. If you live in Arizona, in the Mesa, really in Arizona, we can meet. We drive a lot.
Yeah.
We can meet up. We don't have a budget, but we'll pay for you once. But we also, like I said earlier in the episode, we have this awesome app called Anchor. That's what we record on. It's what we publish on. You can get on Anchor specifically and leave us a voicemail, and we'd love to listen to it in the episode and kind of respond to you directly. Yeah. You can find our email at it's thetablehousechurch@gmail.com.
Yeah, we're working on changing that.
We're working on changing that. We'll have it with our website here soon.
Yeah.
But other than that, we are so thankful for all of your listens and support. We just can't wait to continue.
I think we're going to be cut off soon.
So. All right. Well, friends,
Bye,
it's good
guys.
to see you. We'll talk to you later.